Welcome back to the GenTwenty Podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Marina. And today we're talking about the importance of being your own best friend with Taylor Leddin, the author of the Time Capsule Journal, a personal growth workbook you fill out half of now and then put away for a bit before you fill out the second half. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while or following Nicole or myself, you know that we love notebooks and we love personal growth. So we're very excited about this workbook and we're speaking with Taylor today. Taylor, can you tell us how you came up with this idea?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, first I wanted to say thank you for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be speaking with you both. And I love talking journal things with fellow journal lovers. So I think this has to go back to high school is how this originally started. I was a senior and I was getting ready to graduate. And I found a notebook that had been untouched in my desk. And I just kind of started writing down, daily diary entries, and I would print things out from my computer, like funny little memes or what have you, and I'd put them in there. And eventually I kind of saw how much of a slice of life it was. And that coupled with the fact that I was at such a turning point in my life to be an impending graduate and becoming an adult, I thought it would be really interesting to fill it up in its entirety with everything in the now and create things like a bucket list and questions for my future self. And I decided to finish it up and put it away for 10 years. And I finished high school on my 18th birthday. So I told myself that I would open it on my 28th birthday, which is going to be my next birthday. So I can't believe it's gone by that fast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to open it. It's not till May, so I still have some time, but this past 10 years has flown by, so that'll be here before you know it. But
And now a word from our sponsors. Do you hate your job? Do you feel like everyone around you has their career together and you're stuck in another soul-sucking job for what feels like 100th time? Are you asking yourself why it's so hard to find work that makes you happy? I want to tell you about my friend Marina and her program, Get Me Out of This Job. She's a career coach, and her program, Get Me Out of This Job, helps you find confidence and clarity in the next steps of your career. Serena helps you build a career around your life instead of you feeling like you have to build your life around your career. And I did her program, and it was life-changing. Before I worked with her, I worked 9-to-5 jobs and just was so miserable. I couldn't figure out why I was so unhappy. I went from job to job. And then after I worked with her, I became an entrepreneur, a writer, an author, a podcaster, and just gave me so much clarity, life-changing. So the best part is mention GenTwenty and you get 10% off your coaching package. Head to getmeoutofthisjob.co to learn more or follow her on Instagram at getmeoutofthisjob.
so I did that, and then I wound up doing the same thing in college. When I was about to graduate, I did another journal. And then I started telling my friends about it, and they were all interested in the idea, but they were kind of confused as to how to find the inspiration to get started and what to put in there. And so it's almost impossible to explain your brain to someone. So I thought the best thing I could do for my friends was to get them some journals and kind of make a template for them and write down some questions in there that they could answer. And, I stressed that it didn't have to be 10 years, that they were putting between now and later. But then I thought, if I'm doing this for my friends, this could be something that other people could use either during turning points in their life like I had done, or, just for fun. And so I decided to turn the idea into a template, which became the Time Capsule Journal workbook. And it has tons of different prompts that mirror each other, and the user decides how long they want to put between the present and the future. So it could be 6 months, a year, whatever they want to do. And that's kind of how it all started.
I love that. I feel like I think we're all 90s kids, and the 90s were such a popular time for time capsules. Like I know Nickelodeon did one where you they buried it. We did one at my house. My dad and my brother and I buried a shoebox in the backyard. I honestly don't remember if it's still there, but it was such a thing. And like as a writer, I use journals a lot. I know Nicole has a lot of journals too, but it can be really hard to get started. And so I love that you have this kind of built-in go where you just follow the prompts. And I think journaling can be so important as like a self-reflection, and it helps you learn more about yourself. So that kind of segues into what we want to talk to you about today, which is like building a friendship with yourself and how the process of journaling and the Time Capsule Journal can help with that. So Taylor, can you tell us a little bit why it's so important to build a friendship with yourself and like how you can even do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's obviously one of those things that's easier said than done, but I think to some degree we all understand that we are with ourselves 24/7, 365. Like, it just makes sense to want to like yourself, right? Which is, it can be difficult to do, especially at younger ages. I don't know if I could fully say that I loved myself when I was graduating high school, because I didn't fully know myself then. And I came to realize that it just continues to grow. The older I get, the more I get to know myself. And I kind of took a step back and looked at how I could propel that forward and what I could be doing to be building that friendship. And I think journaling is such a big part of that. Like, even if you're not doing a time capsule thing, you could look up prompts that kind of force you to self-reflect and answer hard questions and get you really thinking about, well, how do I feel about this? Or how would I react to that? And I think once you kind of break down those barriers with yourself and allow yourself to be completely honest, you're able to just kind of start building that friendship. And it's not so much to be confused with self-care, which is an important component to it, but taking the time to be mindful and really thinking about who you are, what you want, what you stand for, and kind of watching how you make those things happen and how maybe it changes over time, and just kind of keeping track of that. And then just finding ways to be comfortable, spending time by yourself. I know that a lot of us over the last year and a half or so have probably spent quite a bit of time by ourselves, even if we were sharing a space with somebody else. And so I think that kind of forced us to figure out a little bit of who we are more than maybe we already understood. And so I think it's just kind of taking a step back and asking yourself those deep questions of, who am I and who do I want to be and what can I do to get there? And not so much relying on the opinions of others to define who you are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does make sense. I think that it's just so important to actually like yourself. And I really like that you acknowledge that we don't always necessarily like ourselves or start out that way. And it really is this journey of growth. And Marina has the next question that we wanted to ask you, but she talks about how in like we get so focused on growing that we forget to pause, and that in the Time Capsule Journal you actually demand that of the writer. So why did you decide to format it that way?
Well, I think that it just kind of happened organically, but it turned out to be something that works so well with the concept of getting to know yourself better, that you kind of give yourself a deadline to be finished with the questions, and then you give yourself something to look forward to. But it also gives you a sense of accountability. Like, if you know that you wrote down that you want to, I don't know, travel to Europe or something, say you want to accomplish something, you feel more of that accountability because it's down on paper and it's not just floating in your brain somewhere. Like, you have to look back at that and be faced with the reality of, I wanted to do this. Did I accomplish this? And, that could be anything from finishing school to I have a small list of small accomplishments of like learning how to touch my toes because I still can't do that.
I can't
So,
either.
I don't think it's possible for me at this point. I think I'm just going to give up. But
Yeah, it works if you bend your knees a little.
yes,
Which I think
yes.
is cheating.
So I think kind of, forcing yourself to sit down. It goes back to that first question of building a friendship, like taking that time to reflect. And something else I wanted to mention was I know you had done an episode about how to focus on friendships post college and how you have to make more of a concerted effort to do that because not everyone is in the same place at the same time. And the same thing goes for just yourself, because as time goes on, you tend to get busier and busier, that you need to be carving out that time for you to check in with yourself and just kind of not let time just spiral you into confusion. So taking, and that's the good thing about the journal is that you can do it however it works best for you and the way that your brain and imagination works. Like you could fill it out one question per night before you go to bed. You could do it a bunch of it in one sitting. You could take as much time as you need, and there's no real rules with it, but it does give you that aspect of accountability that I think is really important for growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting you say that we have to like learn to like ourselves, because I know for myself, I struggled to love myself for so long. And I worked really hard at it, but it took years of work. And
Mm-hmm.
there's still moments where I don't like myself. Like I like say something dumb and I'm just like, oh, come on. But it's in reflections through journaling and like giving myself time to pause and reflect that is where I grow. And I think it's okay to like, it's like kind of, I'm not married, but I'm Nicole, you can confirm or deny this. Like you can love someone, but not like them sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
And so, but I feel like that's okay too, for you can like love yourself, but not like where you are or not like what you're doing. But in journaling and kind of taking a step back and reflecting on that. So maybe you don't want to journal, but you meditate on it or something, but you like taking time to reflect is so important to building that trust and relationship with yourself, especially because like you said, Taylor, it's been a long, quiet, lonely year, and
Mm-hmm.
we've all been forced to kind of face ourselves a little bit more honestly.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Vandemonium Design creates wonderfully nerdy artwork that won't freak out your dinner party guests. Products including newly launched notebooks are stunning, chic, and wholly celebrate beloved moments in fandom. Visit www.vandemoniumdesign.com to see the full collections, and be sure to join the adventure on Instagram at Vandemonium Design.
Absolutely. And I'm completely the same way, where I will say something mean to myself because, we tend to be our own harshest critic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've noticed that as time has gone on, I still continue to say, like, oh, that was a dumb thing to say to myself. But then I take a moment to acknowledge the fact that that's not the nicest thing to think about myself, and kind of remind myself that that was just an instantaneous reaction and not a reflection of how I feel about myself. Whereas maybe 10 years ago, I would have had those negative thoughts and just let them sit there, and those kind of fester and feed into the I don't like these things about myself. And so I think kind of having the ability to acknowledge that it's just a bump in the road and it's not you as a person and it's just a moment in time kind of helps with that growth.
For sure. And I think with journaling too, like a lot of times I think the time, because I don't always journal, I just kind of journal off and on, which is why this is such a great method for me. But I think sometimes the reality that I was writing about and the reality that I remember in my head don't always match up. And I don't know if that really makes any sense, but
Yes.
it's like sometimes I'll look back and like something I wrote about, like I didn't really realize at the time how sad I was or
Oh,
like how
yeah.
much I was really struggling, when in my head I'm like, oh yeah, that was just what, like I just kind of make excuses for the time, I guess. Or like I was going through this or whatever, and I just never really dealt with some of the things that I wrote about in my journals. And they, like I found a journal when I moved last year. I was gonna say recently, but it was ages ago, and it just made me so sad for who I was at that time. Even though that's not how I remember that time in my mind, if that makes any sense at all.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, yeah. I totally get where you're coming from with that. When I look back, I have one journal that I used throughout college, and I just hit a really rough patch, and I wrote about it a lot. And now being so removed from it, I think I look back on it more with rose-colored glasses, to where I was like, oh, that sucked, but it wasn't awful. And then you go back and read it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that poor girl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I felt reading that journal. I actually got rid of it because I didn't really want to be reminded of it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting from like I read a lot about writers and how they, live their life. And there's like a 50-50 break where writers will keep journals and then never look at them or even go as far to the point where they like burn them or tear them up or destroy them. And then there are other writers who keep journals and then constantly look back to find new meaning or new content and or new fodder or whatever. And I was just sitting here thinking, like, I've been journaling off and on since I was in college too. And I have tons of notebooks that I've filled up, but I've never looked at them because I think I was too afraid to see what I used to think. And I'm really curious. They're in storage somewhere. I have to find them. But I think there can be a lot of benefit to looking back, but also we have to remember like those were really valid and raw feelings, and we can only see them through these rose-colored glasses now because we've like made it through the other side. And
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point.
like let's see, I just turned 30. I can't say I just turned. I've been 30 for like 4 months. I recently turned 30. And in a previous episode with a previous podcast episode, we were talking to someone about our 20s and feeling like the crises we have. And now that I'm 30, I'm a little bit calmer, I'm a little bit more settled, but I still journal almost every day just to help me process what I'm feeling or what my goals are. And it's interesting how in my relationship with myself changing, how my journaling has changed, because I used to only journal when I was really upset about something. And now it's like, oh, I this is on my mind and I'm feeling neutral about it, but I want to like capture it and see it differently, because I think when you write something down, you're having to process it in that moment anyway. And so you kind of reveal things to yourself as you're writing about a conversation you had with a parent or a friend. And it's like you're seeing it differently in that journaling moment too.
Yeah, I am still kind of the same way with that, where I'll gravitate more towards my journal when I'm feeling upset and need to just kind of get something off of my chest. But I love those, going back and looking at old entries where it's something, like you said, neutral, that was just kind of a moment in time that I may have even completely forgotten about, and being like, oh yeah, that also happened. That's good that it's not all bad memories. So there's definitely benefits to both, and I think that's my favorite thing about journaling, is that everyone has their own relationship with it, and everyone who likes to do it, that is. But I think it's such a big part of how we see ourselves, kind of getting that reflection. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think understanding how you see yourself is really important in liking yourself and building a friendship with yourself. I saw we'll call it a meme on Instagram a couple months ago, and it was like, don't believe everything you think. And I loved that because it was just like,
Yes.
yeah, that's true. And in like when you build a friendship with someone who's like outside of you, there's ebbs and flows, and it's like a process to learn to trust them and to understand them. Like I've made a couple new friends during the pandemic, and it's funny trying to, like, because we communicate a lot through Instagram and Zoom, it's like learning each other's sense of humor and things like that. And so you kind of have to go through that with yourself too. Like if you have to like figure out who you are and what you like. And the more you do that, the more you'll like yourself or find where you want to grow if there's something you don't like. But that it's so valuable to build that relationship with yourself because, like you were saying at the beginning of the podcast, Taylor, you're spending a lot of time with yourself, and it's like I've got me for the rest of my life, so I hope I like myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen such a shift in that with myself where I still have issues with making decisions and kind of being just very much a people pleaser. And but I will say I used to be much more of a doormat when it came to that. And I don't know what exactly made the shift happen, but I just realized one day that I don't always want to be like that. As much as I like to make people happy, it doesn't have to happen ahead of myself all the time. So I began to kind of make myself say no to things and, you know, disagree with things that people say if it's something that I disagree with. And I think that that's helped so much with my growth to show me like, oh, you actually don't like this. So it's okay to say something. Like you don't have to be afraid of what the reaction will be. So I think kind of being mindful of that as well. I think mindfulness is such a huge part of it, of just taking everything in and being like, how exactly do I feel about this?
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's so hard, I think, being a people pleaser because I think most of us tend to be people pleasers because we were raised to be parent pleasers, which is like a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it does take a lot of work to overcome that. And I think journaling can really be a powerful tool to get through that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
I really relate. I'm currently trying to be less of a people pleaser, and I'm trying to embrace that one word sentence of no. And it's interesting how knee jerk of a reaction it is. Like someone might ask me, "Oh, can you do this?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes, of course. Let me do this." And it's like, "Marina, you don't have time in your schedule to do that. You can say
Yes.
no." And so but in getting to know myself and my priorities better, I can better stand up for myself, it's like a beautifully empowering circle of, not a circle of life, but like everything lends it to itself for like growth and betterment.
It really does. And it's interesting once you start to see that, and you can really appreciate it more once you're picking it apart and seeing how, you know, one hand feeds the other kind of thing. So it's a very interesting process as much as it is a beneficial one.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, talking about our younger selves, what do you wish you could have told your younger self that no one else told you?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind with this is that I still struggle with this, and I know a lot of people do too, that I very much compare myself to others, and that's only gotten worse with, constant social media highlights and things, as we all know. But when I was younger, I have an older sister and an older cousin that I'm very close to, and I just kind of assumed that their trajectories would be what I would wind up doing. And like, for example, they both started dating their now husbands in college. So by the time I was going to college, I was like, okay, this is the time that I'm going to find my husband. And I put such an emphasis on that. And spoiler alert, I did not meet my future husband in college. I wound up meeting him down the line on a dating app. But I think kind of not comparing your journey to someone else's, because eventually I realized, well, if all our journeys are meant to be the same, then what's the point of all of us being here? And I needed to embrace the fact that I always kind of marched to the beat of my own drum, and I began to take different like career turns and things that were more in line with my creativity and things like that. And it's given me so much more of an appreciation for the course that my life took, rather than following some map that never even existed in the first place because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. So I think it's so important not to compare your timeline to others, because we're all doing it differently. And the truth is, most of us, if not all of us, don't always know what we're doing anyway. So no one has the secret to it. So just doing what's best for you is what's going to wind up being the best decision.
Absolutely. That's so perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Taylor. And where can we find you?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter and Instagram at Taylor Leddin, just my full name, no spaces. And my website is taylorleddin.com. And then the Time Capsule Journal is on Amazon.
Thank you. We will link all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here with us today and talking about journaling and growth, two of our favorite topics ever.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so nice talking with you both.
Of course. So that's been another episode of the GenTwenty Podcast. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.